This is the Amadon Planet Podcast, episode 61. I'm your host, Joel Amadon. Thank you for joining me on this never-ending quest to figure out how to teach better. Today on the podcast is colleague, friend, neighbor, Burhanettin Keskin. He is a professor of early childhood here at the University of Mississippi. His office is 2 doors down from mine, and we're going to talk about an article he wrote called When Even is Uneven, Inclusion as Exclusion. It's from the Journal of Autoethnography. It sounds pretty serious, but really we kind of boiled it down, and we had a little conversation before we posted this podcast about what to title it. It's called How to Love Your Neighbor, and that's really what the conversation boils down to. And it's really, thinking about the stories that he captures in this article that we talk about in the conversation, and thinking about it from regards to, we talk about this as a podcast for learning how to teach better and learning how to be a good neighbor, learning how to love and learning about relationships. There's no better avenue to being a teacher than developing relationships. And I think this article gets at it. Or this conversation gets at that. And so it's a conversation between, this is why I started the podcast, is to have conversations like these and to share them through the electronic waves, whatever. So it's my favorite conversation. And I'm just glad I got to have it with him. I'm glad for my friend Burhanettin. I'm glad he got a chance to put this out there so other people can read it. But then also knowing how academic publishing goes, that it's hidden behind a paywall. And so, all right, so how do we share it? So we do it through a podcast. And so I'm glad he shared this article with me. I'm glad he was willing to have the conversation, and glad he's willing to allow us to share it through the podcast. And so he's an interesting guy, and I'm loving the things we get into in this conversation, so I'm not going to delay much more. I do want to just highlight a couple things that we're doing on the podcast. We have done, or we're going to do. One thing is we've done the Transition Years podcast series, so that was sponsored by the University of Texas at Austin Dana Center, which does a lot with regards to math education, and so they sponsored this thing with the Transition Years, which is the last 2 years of secondary education or high school, and the first 2 years of post-secondary, whatever that could be. Could be at an institution like the University of Mississippi, could be a community college, could be in a trade, whatever. So thinking about those transition years and how to maximize math education experiences, we did those 2 podcast episodes where the last one we got a lot of math ed leaders. It was pretty impressive Zoom room that we were in to record that with my friend John Stanley, and we had 4 organizations represented. So again, pretty impressive little podcast that we had. So we had 2 podcasts in the Transition Years series. So if you're looking for those episodes, you can go to AmadonPlanet.com/transition years. And if you go to that link, you'll also be able to find the links to all the other content that was put out by John Staley as the facilitator of the Launch Years kind of math organization leadership group. And they did like 3 webinars and then these 2 podcasts. So the 2 podcasts came out of the Amadon Planet feed. The rest of the content is the webinars. There's a link at that AmadonPlanet.com/transition years if you want to go find the rest of that content. Pretty cool stuff, and how they're getting a lot of stakeholders together to think like, what do we do with regards to this? So if you're thinking deeply about, how to make math courses more relevant, making sure there's no wasted step from transition years. So one thing that people talk about is, they take calculus in high school and then they take calculus again at the university. That seems wasted, right, to have that overlap. How do we make sure that there is no wasted step, we're just building constantly, that everything's meaningful, and then also we're looking at, are inequities present in those transition years, and how do we eliminate those inequities? And so a lot of people might think of, they're talking a lot about pathways, and there's difference between pathways and tracking. And again, a lot of this content gets at that. All that being said is we just finished that series, and maybe there'll be more in the future. Who knows? And so, but for right now, there's 2 episodes. And again, you go to AmadonPlanet.com/transition years to find that podcast series. Also coming up, we're running quickly to the end of the year, and we just have lots to be thankful for. One, October and November of this year were the most successful months with regards to the Amadon Planet podcast, more downloads than ever. In each of those successive, like October, we kind of blew it out. We're like, wow, that was a lot. And then even with November, was skipping a week with regards to Thanksgiving. There still was a lot of downloads. So really appreciate those of you listening and sharing and doing all that good stuff. And we'll try to keep putting out good content. And speaking of good content, I'm getting in the way of this episode. So without further delay, talking about his article, When Even is Uneven, Inclusion is Exclusion with Burhanettin Keskin, and basically how to love your neighbor. Here is my conversation with Dr. Burhanettin Keskin. Burhanettin Keskin, thank you for joining me on an episode of the Amadon Planet podcast. How are you?
Thank you. I'm good. Thank you.
It's very good. So we're in a remote location, and thank you for welcoming me to your house. I appreciate it.
Of course.
Awesome. And we've got some great tea. I know you're not a coffee person, but I get to get some delicious, is this Turkish tea?
Yes.
Awesome. Great. So again, thank you for joining us. We've got an article we're going to dive into. I thought it was just powerful what you shared in the article. We'll get into that in just a second. But first, before we get into that, you're a colleague and a friend, but could you just introduce yourself to anyone that's listening?
Yes. My name is Burhanettin Keskin, and my name is as challenging as my profession. I teach at the college, and I teach early childhood education to teacher candidates, mostly. So I was born and raised in Turkey, and I got my undergraduate degree in sociology in my hometown, Erzurum, which is the east side of Turkey, where you don't usually see the tourists. It's the mountainous, cold area of Turkey. So I got my BA in sociology in my hometown, and then I got a scholarship from Turkish government to study abroad. And I came to the United States in 1999 and started my master's degree at the University of Colorado, Denver, in early childhood education. And then I started my PhD in Syracuse University in child and family studies. And then after a semester, I decided to move to Florida and finish my PhD in early childhood education. So, and then when I finished my PhD, I went back to Turkey as the requirement of my scholarship. I worked there 3-4 years, and then I got a job interview because I flew from the other continent, so they felt bad and they gave me the job. That's how I ended up in the U.S.
Oh, and where was the job?
Columbus State University.
Columbus State University.
Yeah, in Georgia.
In Georgia, yeah.
That was the only reason they offered me the job.
Was it because you came so far?
Yes.
Come on. I don't believe that. And I love it because I just, when you're talking about your name and like, I just think about some things that, I remember the first time I met you. And again, just, I have a very short name, Joel. And like, I heard Burhanettin Keskin. And then, is that what you, and I was like, what do you go by? He's like, Burhanettin. I'm like, absolutely fantastic. That's great. Well, then I didn't know the part about Syracuse. Like, maybe you're like, hey, this is too much like home. Let's go to Florida.
To be honest, no offense to anybody attending to that university. It felt like everybody's life was revolving around school. That's it, Take the bus, go to the library to your class home, and then you repeat. It was gloomy, rainy, cold. Yeah. It was like, and I love the sunshine.
Yeah.
After coming from Denver to Syracuse, it was a big shock for me. I was like, where's the next sunny place that I can go?
Yeah. That's great. And and if anyone knows you, like you see you on the walking path and like getting out there and enjoying it. So, and also too, focusing in on the purely academic side. I mean, and I'm going to brag on you a little bit. You're kind of a Renaissance man with all the different interests you have, and there we go. You're going to just draw a little bit. Sorry. No, like your drawings and like do poetry and like I don't know. I appreciate that about you, and it's not all just job and nothing. Like you've got a great family, like, and again you have many interests as well.
Yes, it's. I don't know. I think it is something that I cannot. I cannot help not to. Like it just happens so naturally. I can't just be focusing on academics. I have to write some things that I'm writing, and I'm hoping one day it will somehow turn into a book. And drawing is something that I can't help. I have to do it,
Exactly. No, that's
and
awesome.
Cooking is another one.
Yeah, absolutely.
Couple things, yes.
Yeah, that led to, and we just briefly laughed about it. We were talking about when I was doing jiu-jitsu, and you're like, "Hey, I'd like to try that." And we did that once, and like, that was enough of that.
Yes, I have enough interest to keep me busy.
That's right. And so, we wanted you shared an article that you had written in it's the Journal of Autoethnography, if I'm correct. Yeah,
yes.
There you go. Journal of Autoethnography, When Even is Uneven, from Inclusion as Exclusion. And read it and was pretty struck by it, wanted to do this conversation. I thought it was something to share. I think we're always thinking about, on this podcast, about learning to teach better, and I think we can learn something from this article on how to teach better. So can you provide a brief background of the article and how did it come to be?
Yes. As a parent, you will always have some moments where your children will come home and tell you some stories, and it's going to upset you that it's happening at school. But as someone who's not from here, and you hear that your children at times are discriminated one way or another because of their origin, their beliefs, it really hits you hard. It's not, if it was for other reasons, maybe it wouldn't affect you that much, but because of your background, and it's purely because of your beliefs, it hurts you a lot. So I had an option to just, okay, it's lived, done, move on. But I felt like I had the obligation to write it down, so maybe some teachers, maybe some other people will read it, some parents will read it and say, this gives me a pause. Maybe I should be a little bit more careful about what I'm saying around my children. As a teacher, maybe I should be more careful about how I am treating everybody. Am I really being fair? Am I favoring people like me and excluding some people who are not like me? So I wanted to write it down so it won't disappear. Right. I felt like it was the right thing to do, to honor that memory. It was painful, but it was a learning experience for me. And I wanted that to be on the record so people can read it and learn what I felt. And so I just didn't want it to disappear.
Yeah, absolutely.
That strong moment, it felt like it was wrong to ignore it, just let it just be forgotten.
Right. And so you engaged in some autoethnography, and I guess, for those that might not be aware, can you just describe what autoethnography is?
Yeah. So you can look at the origin of the word, like autoethnography. So auto means self.
Yep.
Ethno is
autobiography.
Yeah. So self. Ethno is anything related to ethnicity, race, social issues. And graphy is to examine, to tell. So it's like you are telling a story to people about yourself, but you are examining that story and telling us and linking it to a broader issue, a social issue.
Yeah.
So it's different than memoir or just simply writing your personal experiences. You are linking it to a larger context.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, and so and to be honest, I was looking at autoethnography when I was looking at my dissertation because I was going to be engaging in teaching and thinking about what a specific kind of teaching as teaching math as an act of unconditional love, and so maybe autoethnography would be a means for doing that, which it could have totally been. Just I don't think I was skilled enough as a writer. So, you did a really good job with this, and it seemed like actually the situations that you discuss in here were were stories. It'd be hard to tell the story of a semester of teaching, which is what I engaged in, versus these are almost like vignettes. Would you say
Yes.
Vignettes of situations that you experienced, and then again looking at it with that broader lens. So, any other background you want to share?
So these are my article is based on a couple personal stories. Mm-hmm. So I try to find a common thread and then link them together and then link it to a larger social issue, and then tell my story and hope that people will be empathetic when they are reading it. That's the power of autoethnography. You mentioned something that it's really sometimes it's seen as like sometimes some people belittle autoethnography because they say it's just me research, me search. But really, writing an autoethnography is, in my experience, and I can tell that people who are engaged in this will probably agree with me, that it's way harder than writing other types of articles, which I have done before too. But none of them took this long to write.
Yeah.
None of them made me stop and take a break, because emotionally at times it was overwhelming. Yeah. I had to take a break to write it and come back. And also the style is different. It's as you said it's not purely academic, actually. It's like a marriage of academic writing and creative writing. Yeah. So that's the challenge of it. How can you bring these two things? Usually they don't go well together. Most academic writings are not very creative. They're actually very boring, So you have to bring these two ends together, and which is a hard job. It really is a hard job. So
that's why I started this podcast, because some of the things I can write are pretty boring. But again, going back to the compliment I paid you, like Renaissance man. I mean, this is like you're bringing in these highly academic, analytic perspective, but then also like there's well written stories, and and again, what's I think another difficult thing with autoethnography as compared to if you did an ethnography like of a community or some culture, and you got your notes and you leave. Well, you got your notes and that's it, and then you start writing it, and like the only thing you have, you're going off of your notes. Versus you're writing this and you're like, well, you're checking yourself probably all the time. Like, does that really true? Is that really? And like, there's this it'd be like almost constant reanalysis that's happening at the same time. I don't know. Is that what you experience?
This is my second autoethnographic article. Every time I write autoethnography, so not a lot, obviously, too, but in each case, when I was writing it, it taught me something when I was writing it. Mm-hmm. In my first autoethnographic article, it was about the ethnic tension that I went through when I was in Turkey, growing up in a rough neighborhood, and so I had a lot of negative experience with another ethnic group, and that's all I remembered from my childhood, basically, all negative stuff. Yeah. But as I was writing it, because writing is a process, it's therapeutic. It reminds you of certain things. It takes the dust away from certain things that you have forgotten. Yeah. So when I was writing it one day, I suddenly remember an old, what we called Kurdish grandpa, old guy. I just totally forgot about him. Yeah. He just appeared in front of me. Of course, not real, but like in my in your memory. Yeah. In my memory, I was like, I forgot about him. He was so kind to me and everybody else I knew. Yeah. He will wake up early in the morning, as I was also waking up and just watching the sunrise. He will wake up, he will pray before sunrise, and he will start reading Quran outside of his makeshift house. It wasn't in a good shape, but he will read it, and then he will start offering food to people who are passing by, just with a big, huge smile. Wow. He couldn't stand up straight, so he was like bent but with that little body of his, he was emitting so much positivity.
Yeah.
I remember him, and I was like, this is the beauty of autoethnography. When you're writing it, it reminds you of certain things too.
Yeah.
And it teaches you certain things. And I really liked it. And the same thing happened with this one too. So when you're writing, it's not simply just the ideas up here in your brain and then you just put it on the screen or on the paper. It's almost like an interaction in a way.
Yeah.
And from that bouncing of ideas between you and yourself.
Yeah.
And
it's almost like your subconscious.
Yeah, something comes out that wasn't there before, or it was there, but it was not known to you.
Yeah. Well, maybe you can share it if you recall what maybe something that was revealed at the same time as telling us about maybe one of the vignettes.
So one of the things first experience that I had with my daughter's hell episode, in the article, where people, like children, cornered her and said, you are going to hell because you are Muslim, you are not Christian. And so I have written it to a side, I took notes about that experience and stuff. But then something else happened, and I was like, I didn't write that down immediately, but later on I wrote it down, and then I brought them together, and I started seeing some link like that. There is some common thread that's going on. When I started writing, that common thread that I saw as even, as an exclusive statement, not inclusive statement. And when I was writing it, some more information revealed to me in my mind, this is not just even as an exclusive statement, but it's also power assertive statement. Whoever is saying it automatically nominates themselves as the power granting authority. I decide who is going to be included, who is not going to be included. So then this power aspect of that statement revealed itself to me.
Yeah.
So, but it wasn't initially there. So
the writing of it,
created that. I made that connection as I was writing it.
Yeah, and just in the introduction, you do a good job of laying out two sentences, and the second sentence I'm going to highlight: we need to show compassion to the people whose religion is different from ours, even to the people of X religion. So when like you say that, whenever that is said, even to that, all of a sudden we just created a hierarchy right there.
Definitely. And most people who are saying such statements, they have good intentions.
Good intentions,
yes. Good intentions. So we have to keep that in mind, that these are not people who are trying to hurt the other, they're trying to be inclusive. But because of poor choice of word, or when it's done carelessly, it can actually hurt more.
Yeah.
Because when you use such even statements for the underdog, it seems like it is inclusive. But if you change that religion X with something else that's the common religion of the society, suddenly people will say, wait a minute, what do you mean?
Right.
Yeah. But for an underdog, it sounds like inclusive, Right.
And actually, I'm going to link in the show notes. So, we did something in a professional development that I was a part of, where we talked about target and non-target groups. And I don't really like that terminology, but it's kind of like what we're saying, that there's a kind of a hierarchy. There's a hierarchy in certain social societies.
Yes, it's like a soft target. You can, punch on this target. It's not going to make a big deal. You're not going to hear a lot of noise out of it.
Right.
But if you were to touch this group, however,
yeah.
even though they might be minority too, you can't do that. But what you can't do with this one, which rightfully you shouldn't, you shouldn't do it. But somehow it's okay if this group is not as valuable. It's considered as valuable.
Right. And so you're thinking about some of my self-descriptors: white, male, middle class, Christian. What else I could say? Able-bodied, right? There's a lot of things. There's a lot of doors that just swing open, or wind at my back, right? And so And you think about there's privilege there. Even like this was pointed out to me, like if I go to a conference or I go travel somewhere on my own, and I'll go like, hey, where can I run? Or I don't even ask. Like I say, where can I run?
Uh-huh.
I don't even ask about running. Like where can I run? And I'll think about running right then. It could be in the dark, it could be light. I don't care. I'm going for a run.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like there's other folks that they'd be like,
they don't have that kind of luxury. They have to think.
Yes, and so like there was a privilege there, and it was one of those situations where I didn't even think about that as something as a privilege, but that's kind of what a privilege is, right? Like you don't even, some of them that you don't even know they're there. And so I love the way that you talked about with language. Like if you just switch that around, all of a sudden that
hurts.
It would come around like, wait, what do you mean? What do you mean about my religion? Right?
Yeah, we should be tolerant to even Christians. We're like,
right.
What are you saying?
Yeah.
Of course you should be. Like we are Christian,
That's right, yeah, exactly. But that's the thing here. And so what I love about this article is like, like you said, like there's people with good intentions. They've taken a step, and this, what I think is great about it is like, hey, how can you take another step?
Mm-hmm.
How can we be just a little bit more sensitive? And so,
yes. But with that comes with something to think about. So my intention was to make bridges, build bridges, not to burn them. So the next step is, how do we get to know each other? But if we are extremely sensitive, then it kills the conversation. So right. I don't want my article to be taken that way either.
Right.
So I don't want it to, because I got an email from one of my friends. He was like, can you come see this sign and tell me if it is inclusive or not? I said, hey, I'm not an inclusive police. I'm not here to...
Burhanettin approved.
Yeah, it's not what my intention is. I don't want people to be extremely sensitive around me or when they're talking. But that's not the case. My criticism, because that will kill the conversation.
Right.
If you want to kill any conversation, just be safe and don't talk, or talk some mundane stuff, and you don't get to know that person.
Right.
So that's not the intention of this article. This article is to open the doors of our souls to one another, so we can get to know each other, but with a little bit consideration. There are some statements that we have been using over and over. We don't really think about, is this really the best way to say it?
Right.
That just gives us a pause, like, hold on just a second. Let's reconsider those statements and then see if we can come up with a better versions of them.
Well, yeah, and then reading the vignette about your interaction with your daughter and the situation that was unveiled, it was like, you're writing from your perspective as a father. We're both fathers, and thinking about an interaction with your child. I have, and thinking about my own child, and like if they had that experience, I mean, it was emotional, and like what, and again, the power of autoethnography, the power of what you created is the power of empathy, and that's, and I think what you're saying too is we want these conversations so we can have empathy for it. So I'm not just thinking about X group, I'm thinking about my friend, right? Or our relationship, or there's someone that I like, so that we can have compassion and empathy for each other that is genuine and build more understanding about each other.
I think that's as you mentioned, it's the power of autoethnography. It's not purely academic, it doesn't have to be, and it's creative, but also it pushes you to take the other person's perspective.
Yeah.
And it's very hard to do so just simply reading textbook information, Right. You can read about statements about, you need to be inclusive. Don't, judge people based on some mundane things that you see or based on whatever people are telling you, use your logic, etc. Yeah, these are good statements, but they're not going to really click with you.
Right.
But when you read a story, that's how you connect to people with personal stories, and that's the power of autoethnography.
Yeah. So we've talked a little bit about some lessons that were learned in the writing and the reading of the article. What other lessons? I mean, anything else that popped? I know you're a good note taker, so.
So the lessons, I think, everybody needs to think that, whatever I am doing in life, is this really making a group of people's life harder or easier? I know there's a tension, and this tension is all over the place, not just in the U.S. You know, like immigrants, refugees,
Right.
and people tend to think, okay, I am here and they're coming here, these poor immigrants. Sometimes the story is not complete when you look at it that way.
Right.
My goal to come to the United States wasn't to stay here. It wasn't my intention. Some people come here because they have a very harsh condition back home, wars or something major going on. That wasn't the case for me. I came here to study. I felt like America was the best place to go.
Yeah.
And I chose America over some other countries, and I said, I want to study there. And when I am done, I'm going to go back and, live in Turkey.
Right.
That was my goal. But sometimes what you plan and what happens, they don't match.
That's right.
Yeah, I am here, living here, because I met my wife, and, so we decided to stay here, which is, I think, better for both of us to be here. But I just want people to re-examine the narratives that they are hearing from the media. Right. Just because I'm not from here, that doesn't make me any less human, because I didn't choose where I was born.
Right.
I'm glad I don't have any problem with my nationality. Like where I am from. As a dual student, I like being here too. It's not like I forced myself to be here. I chose to be here too. So I don't want people to misunderstand me.
Right.
But I am happy with my ethnicity, with my background, and with my origin country. Sometimes we have a kind of a deficit approach to immigration. I want people to just re-examine that concept.
Yeah.
Because it's very simplistic, actually.
Right.
And oftentimes simplistic approaches lead you to the wrong way.
Yeah. Well, I was reading about, I think the book that I like a lot is the How to Be Anti-Racist by Ibram X. Kendi, and he talks about like assimilationists and segregationists, and like both of those are wrong. Like there's beauty in everyone, and so like why does it have to be we're all together or we're separate? Like, how do we live together and that takes work. It does take work. It takes about building relationships, building friendships, building understanding. But that it doesn't come from just having one perception and never learning and growing about people.
And if everybody is so much alike, I mean, that's really not the society that I will prefer. Really, I will like some different opinions. That's right. That's how we grow. Yeah. When we are challenged with ideas. The reason our muscles are growing because we are challenging.
Yeah.
You don't grow muscles laying on the couch and doing nothing.
Yeah, I got a soapbox on that. I was down to transition lenses where all the different sections are different, different things, so your eyes don't have to focus. Uh-huh. It was worse because I took my glasses off, I can't see a thing, so I went back to my old school. They're one way, so I can keep my eye muscles working. So
it's good to have different opinions, and I think.
Well, that's what makes things wonderful.
But people say this and they believe in it, but without really examining it, you can't tell that it's actually what they are doing. Right. Like the words and action, the gap between the two. Yeah. It's big. We say, we like diversity, but then when you bring a different opinion, that it's not a crazy opinion. It's just a different perspective. It just like you are perceived as like an outcast. Like how can you say we value diversity, but when it comes to different opinions, different ideas, that might make you feel a little bit uncomfortable? Right. How can you say, treat that opinion as like an outcast? Right. Instead of something that you can develop another idea to address that opinion. Instead of that, it's easy to just label it as an outcast. It's the easy way to do a simplistic way.
Right. Yeah. And that's not growth, right?
That's not.
Yeah.
It's actually declining. It's not even staying the same.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, because there is growth, there's staying the same and declining. That's
Right.
declining.
That is declining.
If the society, if or when it comes to that point, that means it's declining. It's not letting different ideas breathe and develop. That's how empires collapse.
You're right.
You know, as soon as they start cutting their links to the outside world, thinking that we are so great, we do everything right, whatever we do is the greatest thing. We don't need other people's opinion. You know, we don't care what other countries are doing. Then you start declining.
Right.
Yeah.
No, that's.
And you don't have to be a historian to see this. It's so obvious. You know?
Exactly. Any other lessons that you wanted to highlight?
So this is I think the shortcomings of autoethnography. So when you are reading autoethnography, it's N1. It's just one person's experience. Yeah. Okay. So just looking at that image that I described in the library, posed as a all welcome with a woman with a hijab face covering. I don't like it, but it's just me. Other people may see that and then feel empowered, like, hey, this is a very welcoming place. Right. So whatever I wrote, take it with a grain of salt. Yeah. It's a one person's perspective. That's how I felt. That's what my experiences have been so far in what I wrote in that article. But you have to approach it as one person's opinion. Right. Okay, and I could be way off. You have to have self-doubt. And of course, like anything else, it has to be balanced. You don't want to overdo it. You don't want to not do it at all either. Right. So my self-doubt is that this is a one person's opinion. Read it and see if you can learn something, or if it turns some lights in your brain, or maybe you can say, hey, I disagree with this, and this is why I disagree. And as I said, that statement, that even some people close to home, they find that image in the library very welcoming. Yeah, I didn't. It bothered me. Yeah. So one person. So think of that way. Yeah,
to understand different people's perspective. Like, here's what I was thinking, and it was bothered. Here's how I was thinking. I felt welcomed. Okay. Yeah. Right. And then having a better understanding, we're growing closer to each other, and that's creating a better situation for everyone.
And it was more than just one incident. If I were to just take one incident and write a whole article about it, then it will have lowered its generalizability, because it's just one incident, one person, one incident. So I tried to avoid that problem. I brought several vignettes together to say, I see a common thread, some tendencies here. Yeah. And to avoid that N1, like sample size one issue. So,
and then again, we're trying to encourage people to engage with ideas, engage with experiences, engage with each other. So if someone reads this article and they don't do that, like, what are some cautions? I had one, I don't know, like, this was one that I think we talked about before when talking about recording this episode, was, the person that is taking that effort and, is trying to take a step, and then like, well, it was, why should I even try? They throw up their hands like, why even try? And like, so then they completely disengage. And so, but I think what the thing is like, this is about even continued engagement is like, here's how, if you're taking these intentions, how you can enact them even better, right?
Yeah, so this is not to discourage any inclusive endeavors. So that's not the point of the article. What I'm saying is we just have to be a little bit more careful. So if you're trying to be inclusive towards one, population that's marginalized, it's better to engage with them and then see what they think about that before you make it public. So I think that's a good start. Yeah. And my whole point is just a little bit consideration. Sometimes good people do bad things or even with the good intention.
Right.
I'm not here to write or say that, these are terrible people. No, what I'm saying is that being good, having good intention is necessary, but it's not enough.
Right.
You have to do your homework.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a reminder for whoever is reading. It's also a self-reminder for myself too.
Oh, yeah.
So it's not I'm lecturing people, and this is a lecture for myself too. There are lessons for me to remember as well. So this is not a guy up here at a high place talking down to people. No, this is a reminder for everybody, including myself.
That's right.
Yeah, that's why it's autoethnography. It's lesson gathered from my own personal stories to teach something to other people and link it to other problems, but also a reminder for myself. Like, I have to be careful with my language too. When I am trying, there's a saying in Turkish, they say when you're plucking your eyebrow, you don't want to make yourself blind. If your purpose is to beautify yourself, but then you end up blinding yourself. So, yeah, the intention is good. You want to beautify something, but if it is done carelessly, it can cause problems.
Okay. Making a note about that when I pluck my eyebrow.
What I will also, another reason, one thing that I want to mention. So, just because you are the mainstream, you are part of the mainstream culture or race, whatever. When you see someone is being discriminated one way or another, we have choices, right? We can be silent, or we can stand up for people. Mm-hmm. Because when you're standing up for others, you're not just standing up for others. You're also standing up for your dignity as well. Mm-hmm. It's not just for others. And that's how bad people get away with stuff, with terrible stuff, because if they realize that no one is going to say anything, they're going to do even more bad stuff, bad. So our loyalty that we have to keep in mind, our loyalty is not to ourselves or our tribe or our relatives, our kinsmen. Our loyalty is to truth and justice. Even if it doesn't serve us individually, even if it is against us, we have to say, that's wrong. I saw it happening. I'm going to say something. Not just to alleviate that person's burden, but it's the right thing to do.
Right.
Because what is better than having a compass of truth and justice? Even if it is against yourself. That's actually a verse from Quran. I wrote it down. That's when you I believe it's in the Harvard School of Law library. It says the verse goes like this. If I can,
go for it.
It says.
It's in the microphone.
It's the chapter 4, verse 135 from Quran. It says, "O you believe, stand out firmly for justice as witnesses to God, even as against yourself, your parents, your tribes, or your relatives." So when you do that, you may lose some friends. You may lose maybe even your position or whatever, but you gain much more. That is how I see things.
Yeah. No, I remember we used to have a video we would play in one of our courses about the Bully Project, and it talked about being an upstander, like this idea of standing up and like saying, hey, if we stand up together, like no bully can upstand over many upstanders, right?
That's true.
And so like to be that leader of standing up for somebody else or for something, and like you're saying, anything that you see that is wrong.
Even if it doesn't eliminate the problem, it will lessen it. That's something too. Sometimes you don't have power to eliminate a problem. Individuals hardly do, but you can lessen it. Next time that person is going to say something that will discriminate another person, they will think twice. So maybe another person will say something. Yeah. But if they keep getting away with discriminating people and making their lives harder because they are not like them.
Right. Yeah.
That's the That's the issue. That if they don't see any resistance, then they get away with it, and situation gets worse quickly.
No resistance equals encouragement, right?
You know, sometimes that's true. If an individual is too powerless to do anything, maybe there are some situations like that. You know, I don't want to dismiss that possibility.
Right.
But oftentimes we can say things, we can do things. Sometimes maybe you can't change things, but the least you can do, say something.
Right.
You know, that will make it hopefully happen less frequently.
Right.
If people were to speak up a little bit more when they see injustice, when they see someone attacking the truth. You know?
Yeah. So what do we do to learn more?
I think learn more means you have to open your heart to others, you know. And to do that, it's not just a concept, it's an action. Get to know your neighbor, you know. You know, love your neighbor. It's from the Bible, right? Love your neighbor. Mm-hmm. I want people to really think about that, what that really means.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
Love your neighbor means not love your neighbors when they are like you, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a way broader concept, and I want people to think about that concept. When you love your neighbor, that could be your next door neighbor or person whose office is next to you.
Yeah.
That's your neighbor too. Go reach out. Just say hi. You know, how are you? Just talk. Mm-hmm. You know, talking is a good start. But if you just simply just nod your head and just don't talk, you're not really getting to know other people. It's such a weird thing to me, you know, when people just pass by, they don't even get to know you. Sometimes when you try and they just give you some very superficial answers, and it's like, you know, I have enough number of friends. I don't want another one. That type of mentality. I'm like, you know, we have a one-time shot in this life. As far as I know, I might be wrong. You know, as far as I know, that's one shot. Why limit it to this? You know, why not get to know other people and then see what you can learn from others?
That's right.
You know, you cannot possibly know everything as a one person. Knowledge-wise, emotion-wise, everything-wise. The only way for you to know more and develop yourself is if you open yourself and expand your horizon and include more people in your circle.
Yeah. So
the relationship, I will say, what can we do? We need to talk to our neighbors.
That's right.
Or even the people who are not our neighbors, you know.
Yeah.
Now with the internet, invention of internet, that concept of neighbor is much broader.
It's blown out.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Than it was, let's say, 20, 30 years ago.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, and like being able to jump on to and connect with people. Is
connecting with people, heart to heart, being honest, you know.
Right.
When there is honest intention, good intention, occasionally you will make mistakes, you will break someone's heart. But that's why I was saying, like, this article is not written for a hypersensitive culture. It's not to promote such culture. I'm not in favor of that.
Right.
I'm just saying, let's be honest, be genuine, and try to, if you really want to help a group, just do your homework first. And then see if whatever you are promoting or saying or displaying, is this really as inclusive as you think it is?
Yeah. And if you have the relationships,
then you can find out. Yeah. Right. If you don't, you just decide for themselves.
Yeah.
For them, you're like, okay, I think this is, this is good for you.
Well, this is a good model, like sitting at a table with a hot beverage, which was delicious, by the way.
Thank you.
But this is what we want, right? This is what we want to be able to do. But yeah, I just kind of I was thinking about our relationship in the office and being able to, and this is pre-pandemic, being able to go give ourselves a quick hug right before class and stuff like that, or having a quick laugh about something with kids. And those are, it starts in small ways, but then when there's something like this, let's talk about something a little bit deeper, like you have a foundation when you can dive in. Or when we had that really big conversation about love, how you see love in in the Muslim tradition and versus the Christian tradition, and thinking about that and like looking for the commonalities and things. That was a fun conversation.
It's when you look at your past as an individual, you don't remember. When you think about your past, you don't really remember the things that you had in the past. What you remember, basically, is how people made you feel, the relationships that you built over that life. Mm-hmm. And that's the most important thing, the relationships. Right. To cultivate that, we have to get to know each other and the people who we think that they are other, they are different. We need to reach out to them. Right. Even if they're not reaching to us, we need to reach out to them. Mm-hmm. Because they might have good reason to not to reach to us because of the discrimination they might have been like continuously facing, But we need to really expand our horizon and let's get to know people and build relationship, get to know each other. Right. Love your neighbor, know your neighbor, and it starts with knowing your neighbor.
That's right. Yeah. So that's a good word.
Yes.
Anything we can promote for you? I know that this article is not available freely. Again, that's kind of why we want to do the podcast, to share some of the lessons that have been learned. You've done some interesting things with like some conversations with.
Yes. So all I am asking, Joel, is just make me famous. Okay? That's on you. Okay. So do your homework and make me famous. That's all on you. But kidding aside. So that article is not open access, unfortunately. Don't get me started with how the publication world works.
Exactly.
But if anyone really wants to read it, they can reach out to me, and we'll go from there. Mm-hmm. And for other things, I write serious stuff, some academic, like heavy philosophical things.
Yeah.
And some very light things like hypothetical conversation with Jerry Seinfeld. So it's on medium.com if you search my name.
Yep. And we'll put a link to it in the show notes. So from very serious to not so serious, anything in between, I write. Well, you have a great piece on Harold and the Purple, very
Harold and the Purple Crayon. Yes, very theoretical, philosophical, and religious interpretation of Harold and the Purple Crayon.
Which is fantastic.
Yeah, that is so that's not as easy read as this one. But I tend to not limit my writing to one thing.
Right.
Just make it broad writing.
I think those three examples right there alone, like this and the Seinfeld and the Harold and the Purple Crayon.
Yes, anything in between.
Anything in between. Yeah. And also, too, if you're interested in our, we have an excellent program for early childhood at the University of Mississippi, and so we could put links to that as well. And yeah, I just want to say thank you for welcoming me to your home and sharing this conversation.
Yes. I hope you will come again.
All
right. Thank you.
All right, there it is. So lots of stuff being mentioned in this episode. Some links to a bunch of things that you can find at amazonplanet.com/episode 61. Love that conversation with Dr. Keskin. So he's got lots of stuff available. So again, all those links will be at that in the show notes at amazonplanet.com/episode 61. And so like his hypothetical conversations with Seinfeld, links to the article that we talked about, even though it is behind a paywall, you can still look at the abstract and things. And if you want to buy it, you can actually go buy it. Or maybe you have other ways to access it through an institution that you're a part of. Also put a link to his Harold and the Purple Crayon article. It's really interesting. It's very theoretical, but it's a great way to approach it through the children's book, Harold and the Purple Crayon. And so everything, so if you're looking for other things that we mentioned, again, all those links should be there. And if not, you can always email me at joel@amazonplanet.com. If you have some feedback or some ideas about how to make the podcast better, or you have some ideas or suggestions for who we should have on the podcast, always looking for those. Really appreciate all the feedback, and we got more good stuff coming up. So if you're looking for ways to support the podcast, you can subscribe. That's always good. Subscribe and share. People have been doing that because the downloads are up, and really appreciate it. Really appreciate all that. And good feedback on the socials too. But if you're looking for us on the social media, you can get it at Amazon Planet on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. But also we have the Amazon Planet Facebook page. You can like that so you can get all those updates. Whatever social media outlet you like, just we're there. You can also subscribe to the Amazon Planet download. We'll have other information coming out. We're probably going to put out some of that transition year stuff on the Amazon Planet download just to make sure people have access to that material, especially if you're someone that's a stakeholder in the math education sort of world. That's a pretty important stuff, or just even with regards to coursework in those transition years, that would be pretty important information, good information to have access to. Excuse me. And then if you're also looking for ways to support the podcast, there's the Amazon Planet store, the Amazon Planet bookshop. Links can be found in the footer at AmazonPlanet.com. So that's all the way to the bottom of the webpage. If you're looking for that, any of your purchases will support the production costs of the podcast. So finally, thank you for listening to this episode of the Amazon Planet podcast. Thanks to Burhanettin Keskin for sharing his time, expertise, and just his work. I mean, this work that's really personal, and you hear that within the talk. And then just thinking about how to love your neighbor. I really appreciate him and having me over. And thank you for the tea and for inviting me to his house. It's good stuff. Thanks to Matt Midland for the music in this episode. And finally, thank you to all of you out there who are seeking to teach better and be the good in the world by investing in the lives of others. This world is a better place because you have decided to use the gifts you have been given to serve others. Thank you for all that you do. Peace.